How the Flying Milk Bottle Became a Weapon of Vengeance. Chapter 1. Mockery over France. April 8, 1943. At 27,000 feet above occupied France, an oxygen mask couldn't hide the mocking smirk of Oberleutnant Ralph Hermachen. Through the crystal-clear canopy of his Focke-Wulf Fw-190 the veteran ace from Fighter Wing 26 observed the ungainly silhouette struggling to gain altitude, approaching his formation. "The Yankees have sent us flying milk bottles," he transmitted to his wingmen, unable to suppress laughter at the sight of the massive Republic P-47 Thunderbolts fighting against the thin air. Below, 16 P-47Cs from the 4th Fighter Group lumbered upward in tight formation. Their 2,000 horsepower Pratt and Whitney R2800 double wasp engines, 18-cylinder twin-row radials, strained under the weight of 7-ton machines. To German pilots accustomed to graceful Spitfires and nimble Soviet fighters, these portly American craft looked almost comical. Barrel-shaped fuselages topped with greenhouse canopies. Wings that seemed too small for the massive bodies. Propellers larger than anything in the Luftwaffe arsenal. Hermachen couldn't know, nor could any of the German pilots circling like wolves above, that they were witnessing the arrival of a weapon that would methodically destroy the Luftwaffe's fighter force. Within 18 months, these flying milk bottles would transform from objects of ridicule into instruments of terror. The sound of their 8 Browning 50 caliber machine guns would become the most feared sound in German skies. The mathematics of destruction were already loaded into those broad wings. 3,400 rounds of ammunition. Combined rate of fire, 6,000 rounds per minute. Enough concentrated firepower to saw a Messerschmitt in half in less than 2 seconds. The transformation began that April morning when Major Donald Blakesley, commanding the 335th Fighter Squadron, spotted the German formation, positioning for attack. A former Eagle Squadron veteran who had transitioned from Royal Air Force Spitfires just weeks earlier, he understood what his men didn't yet know. Survival in the P-47 required abandoning everything they thought was correct about aerial combat. The Thunderbolt represented a radical departure from traditional fighter design philosophy. While the Germans pursued light interceptors optimized for rate of climb and maneuverability, Republic aviation created something unprecedented: a high-altitude juggernaut using mass, power, and firepower to rewrite the rules of aerial warfare. Among the 56 American pilots dispersed that morning over French skies were men destined to become legends. Future aces whose names would strike fear into Luftwaffe hearts. But on April 8, 1943, they were novices in an unproven machine, facing the world's most experienced fighter force. The Germans had been fighting continuously since 1939. Veterans of Poland, France, the Battle of Britain, and the Eastern Front. The Americans had exactly 0 days of combat experience. This is the story of how industrial logic defeated tactical mastery, how quantity and quality merged into overwhelming superiority, and how German laughter turned to terror when they discovered what synchronized Browning machine guns could do to an aircraft at 400 yards. Chapter 2. Birth of a Dinosaur from 1940. Panic to engineering marvel, the Republic, P-47. Thunderbolt was born from the panic of June 1940. As German fighters swept France aside, Alexander Kartveli, Republic Aviation's chief designer, originally from Georgia, received urgent specifications from the U.S. Army Air Corps. They needed a high-altitude interceptor capable of matching the Luftwaffe's best aircraft. Kartveli designed instead a monster that redefined the boundaries of possibility. "This will be a dinosaur," he admitted to his design team, "but it will be a dinosaur with the right proportions." The XP-47B prototype, first flown on May 6, 1941, shocked everyone who saw it. At an empty weight of 9,900 pounds, it weighed 65% more than its predecessor, the P-43 Lancer. The massive turbocharger system with its complex ducting running through the rear fuselage gave it an almost pregnant appearance. Test pilots approaching it for the first time invariably asked the same question. Does this thing even fly? It didn't just fly. It flew like nothing else at altitude. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, an 18-cylinder radial producing 2,000 horsepower, could maintain full power at 27,000 feet, where German fighters gasped for air. The exhaust-driven turbocharger provided sea-level performance in the stratosphere, where air was too thin for conventional superchargers. Major Hubert "Hub" Zemke, commanding the 56th Fighter Group training at Bridgeport, Connecticut, initially hated the aircraft. His unit lost 18 pilots and 41 aircraft in training accidents between September 1942 and January 1943. The P-47 killed more Americans in training than Germans in its first months of combat. It ground-looped on landing, flipped on takeoff from torque, and dove with such enthusiasm that pilots discovered air compressibility. Their controls froze as shock waves formed over the wings. But those who mastered the machine discovered something extraordinary. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a farm boy from Oklahoma, who would become one of America's top aces with 27 victories, described his first flight. It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. The power is incredible. You don't fly it. You aim it at the target. Chapter 3. Baptism by Fire and Blood. April through May, 1943. Lessons in Pain. The first combat encounters in April and May 1943 confirmed all German prejudices. The P-47 couldn't turn with the Focke-Wulf Fw-190, couldn't climb with the Messerschmitt Bf-109, couldn't match their maneuverability at medium altitudes. Luftwaffe pilots quickly developed tactics exploiting these weaknesses, attacking from below where the heavy Thunderbolts struggled, forcing turning fights where agility mattered more than firepower. Oberst Joseph Pips Priller, commander of Fighter Wing 26, reported to headquarters after the first encounter. The new American fighter is meat for the slaughter. Flies like a truck, turns like a freight train, climbs like a pregnant cow. Our boys call them Indianer, fat targets pretending to be warriors. Statistics seemed to confirm German confidence. In their first month of operations, American fighter groups lost 14 Thunderbolts with only 3 confirmed German aircraft destroyed. The British Royal Air Force, observing from their Spitfires, quietly suggested the Americans might want to reconsider their choice of aircraft. British pilots joked that the best evasive maneuver in a P-47 was to unbuckle and run around the spacious cockpit. But something strange was happening in those early encounters that German intelligence failed to notice. Downed P-47s absorbed incredible amounts of damage before falling. One aircraft returned from a May 4th mission with 21 cannon hits and over 100 machine gun strikes. Damage that would have shredded a Messerschmitt or Spitfire into confetti. The massive radial engine, lacking vulnerable cooling systems, ignored hits that would instantly stop a liquid-cooled fighter. More importantly, when P-47s did bring their guns to bear, results were catastrophic. The Thunderbolt's gun battery created a convergent zone of destruction that German pilots had never experienced. Unlike the rifle-caliber weapons of early war fighters or cannons with limited ammunition, the American fighter could sustain fire for over 30 seconds, an eternity in aerial combat. Chapter 4. The Unkillable, June 26, 1943, the day a legend was born. The event that began changing German perceptions occurred on June 26, 1943, over Lisieux, France. It involved 2nd Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson of the 61st Fighter Squadron and an encounter that would become legendary on both sides of the conflict. Johnson's formation of 48 P-47s was returning from an escort mission when they were attacked from above by 16 Focke-Wulf Fw-190s from 2nd Group, Fighter Wing 26, commanded by Hauptmann Wilhelm Ferdinand Galland, younger brother of the famous Adolf Galland. The Germans executed a perfect attack, diving from the sun with overwhelming speed advantage. Johnson's Thunderbolt, flying tail-end Charlie, caught crossfire from multiple attackers, sustaining catastrophic damage in the first seconds of combat. 21 20mm shells detonated across his aircraft. The canopy shattered. Hydraulic fluid sprayed into the cockpit. The engine cowling tore away. Fire erupted behind the instrument panel. Johnson, wounded in the nose and leg by shrapnel and bullet fragments, attempted to bail out but found the canopy jammed. A 20mm shell had exploded in the canopy track, welding it shut. He was trapped in a dying machine at 27,000 feet. What happened next defied all understanding of combat damage tolerance. Despite having no forward visibility through the oil-coated windscreen, a barely functioning engine that vibrated violently, and controls that responded only intermittently, Johnson managed to level the aircraft and point it toward England. The P-47 continued flying with damage that would have turned any other fighter into falling debris. Then it got worse. A lone Focke-Wulf Fw-190, piloted by an unknown aviator from Second Group, Fighter Wing 26, found the crippled Thunderbolt limping toward the English Channel at less than 170 miles per hour. Historical research never established this pilot's identity, though several names were proposed based on German combat reports from that day. What followed became one of the most extraordinary encounters in aerial warfare history. The German pilot positioned behind Johnson's P-47 and opened fire with 4 20mm cannons and 2 13mm machine guns. Johnson, unable to evade, could only crouch behind his armor plate and pray. The Thunderbolt absorbed the entire cannon ammunition load. Then the German repositioned and opened fire again, now with machine guns only, cannon ammunition exhausted. The German pilot pulled alongside, staring in disbelief at the flying wreckage. Johnson could clearly see his face. Young, blonde-haired, his expression changing from confidence to confusion to something approaching fear. The German repositioned and emptied his remaining machine gun ammunition into the Thunderbolt. It still flew. The German pulled alongside again, shook his head in apparent amazement, gave an informal salute, and turned away, apparently out of ammunition. Johnson's P-47 landed at Manston with the engine failing directly on the runway. The crew chief stopped counting bullet holes after 200. One cannon shell exploded inches from Johnson's head. Another detonated against the armor plate behind his seat. The engine had taken direct hits. Control cables were partially severed. 3 of 4 main fuselage longerons, the structural backbone, were shot through. Yet the machine brought him home. Johnson's aircraft survival sent shockwaves through both air forces. American engineers studying the wreckage realized they had underestimated their own creation. German intelligence, receiving combat reports from Second Group, Fighter Wing 26, initially refused to believe it. No aircraft could absorb such punishment. But testimony from multiple pilots confirmed the impossible. The Thunderbolt had taken everything the Luftwaffe's best fighter could deliver, and survived. Chapter 5. Evolution of a Killer. July 1943 through March 1944. From laughingstock to nightmare. By July 1943, American pilots were learning to exploit the P-47's true strengths. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zemke, commanding the 56th Fighter Group, discovered the secret through brutal trial and error. Don't turn with them. Don't climb with them at low altitude. Use your weight. Use your power. Use your guns. The Thunderbolt's massive weight, initially viewed as a liability, became a weapon. In a dive, nothing could catch it. From 30,000 feet, a P-47 could reach 550 miles per hour, faster than any German fighter could achieve, even in vertical dive. This speed could be converted into altitude in a zoom climb that left pursuing fighters helplessly behind. Captain Walker Bud Mahurin, who would become one of America's first aces in Europe, developed what became known as boom and zoom tactics, though pilots called it Thunderbolt turkey shooting. Instead of traditional dogfighting, P-47 formations climbed to 30,000 feet, higher than German fighters could effectively operate. When Luftwaffe fighters appeared below, the Thunderbolts rolled over and dove, reaching speeds that made deflection shooting impossible for defending Germans. At the bottom of these dives, the American heavy machine guns spoke their piece. German pilots who survived described it as facing a wall of lead. The combined firepower created an impenetrable zone of destruction. Aircraft caught in this convergence pattern didn't just fall, they disintegrated. The true revelation of American firepower came during the double raid of August 17, 1943, on Schweinfurt and Regensburg, the deepest penetration into Germany undertaken to that date. This mission would demonstrate both the P-47's limitations, its range even with drop tanks, and its terrifying effectiveness when properly employed. Major David Schilling, leading the 62nd Fighter Squadron, encountered a formation of Messerschmitt Bf-110 disastrous, heavy fighters positioning to attack B-17s with their heavy cannons and rocket armament. The twin-engine German fighters, heavily armed but less maneuverable, were the Luftwaffe's specialized bomber killers. Schilling's flight of 4 Thunderbolts rolled into an attacking dive from 28,000 feet. Unteroffizier Heinrich Roth, a gunner in one of the Bf-110s who survived, later recalled during prisoner interrogation. "The American fighters fell like hammers from heaven. I opened fire at 800 meters. Good hits. I saw them strike the wing of one fighter. The P-47 didn't even waver. Then it opened fire. The aircraft ahead of us simply came apart. Not shot down, destroyed. Wings separated from fuselage, tail torn off, crew cabin shredded into metal confetti. In 2 seconds, the Bf-110 became nothing." 8. Messerschmitt. Bf-110s were destroyed in less than 1 minute. German pilots had never experienced such concentrated firepower. Each P-47 carried 425 rounds per gun, 3,400 rounds total, weighing nearly 900 pounds. At convergence range, typically set at 300 yards, all 8 ballistic trajectories intersected in a zone approximately 6 feet in diameter. Anything entering this zone met 150 caliber projectiles per second, each traveling at 2,900 feet per second. The ammunition itself was a revelation of American industrial might. While German fighters struggled with limited cannon ammunition, typically 120 to 200 rounds for a 20mm gun, American pilots could sustain fire for over half a minute. Standard combat loading mixed armor-piercing incendiary tracer, and ball ammunition in patterns designed for both destruction and ignition. Lieutenant Colonel Francis "Gabby" Gabreski, who would become America's top ace in Europe with 28 victories, described the effect. "When you hit them with all 8, they don't just fall, they explode. I saw a Bf-109 literally cut in half. The tail falling one way, nose and wings the other. The pilot never knew what hit him." Chapter 6. Death in the Stratosphere, September 1943 through January 1944. High-altitude supremacy. By September 1943, the Luftwaffe was discovering another terrifying reality about the P-47. Its performance dramatically improved with altitude while German fighters suffered. The turbocharged double Wasp engine maintained rated power up to 30,000 feet. German fighters, relying on single or 2-stage mechanical superchargers, saw significant performance degradation above 25,000 feet. Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most successful aces with 206 victories, met this reality fatally on October 8, 1943. Leading Fighter Wing 1 against a formation of B-17s at 28,000 feet over Bremen, Philipp found his Focke-Wulf Fw-190 sluggish and unresponsive in the thin air. The BMW 801 engine, powerful at medium altitudes, gasped for oxygen at nearly 6 miles above Earth. When P-47s from the 56th Fighter Group dove on his formation from 32,000 feet, the German fighters were easy targets. Robert Johnson, now an experienced combat pilot on his way to ace status, was flying at 31,000 feet when he spotted Phillips' distinctive Focke-Wulf with its elaborate nose art. Johnson's combat report was clinical. Opened fire at 300 yards, 30-degree deflection. Observed strikes along entire fuselage. Enemy aircraft exploded. No parachute observed. Phillips' death sent shockwaves through the Luftwaffe. If one of their best, a man who had survived over 500 combat missions on the Eastern and Western fronts, couldn't survive against Thunderbolts, what chance did average pilots have? German High Command ordered an immediate investigation into P-47 capabilities. The report delivered to Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring in November 1943 was sobering. The Thunderbolt's service ceiling exceeded 42,000 feet, higher than any German fighter could reach. Its diving speed approached the sound barrier. Its armor included 3/8-inch steel plate behind the pilot, half-inch bulletproof glass windscreen, and armored deflector plates around the engine. Most alarming, its robust construction allowed it to absorb damage that would destroy 3 conventional fighters and still return home. Chapter 7. Blades of Death. January through March 1944. The Propeller Revolution. In January 1944, a new modification of the P-47 began arriving in England that would complete the transformation from laughingstock to nightmare. The P-47 D-22 was equipped with a Hamilton standard hydraulic propeller with paddle blade design, 13 feet in diameter. The wide blades bit into air like massive oars. The improvement in rate of climb was immediate and dramatic. Where early Thunderbolts climbed at an anemic 2,200 feet per minute at sea level, paddle blade variants could achieve 3,000 feet per minute, matching or exceeding German fighters at most altitudes. The massive propeller also improved acceleration, allowing the P-47 to build energy faster in level flight. Hauptmann Heinz Knoke of Fighter Wing 11, a veteran with over 200 combat missions, encountered the new variants in February 1944 during a bomber interception near Hanover. He wrote in his combat diary, "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. We attacked a formation near Hanover, expecting our usual advantage. They turned into us and climbed with us. When we tried to disengage, they followed us to 30,000 feet. Schmidt was caught and torn apart. Nothing left but smoke and fragments. These are not the same machines we laughed at last year." The paddle blade propeller did more than improve performance. It changed the Thunderbolt's sound. The distinctive thunderous roar created by blade tips reaching supersonic speeds was audible for miles. German ground troops reported they could identify approaching P-47s by sound alone. The deep, menacing rumble that meant death from above. They began calling it Donnerschlag, thunderclap. By March 1944, P-47s equipped with external fuel tanks could escort bombers deep into Germany. Standard configuration carried 2 108-gallon underwing tanks or one 75-gallon centerline drop tank, extending range to over 1,000 miles. With the paddle blade propeller providing improved performance even when loaded, Thunderbolts could fight on equal terms immediately after dropping tanks. The Luftwaffe response was to concentrate on the bombers, hoping to inflict sufficient losses to halt the American daylight campaign. But this required flying through the P-47 escort screen, an increasingly suicidal proposition. German pilots developed a forced respect bordering on fear for the big American fighters. Major Günther Rall, one of Germany's top aces with 275 victories, mostly on the Eastern Front, survived an encounter with P-47s on March 6, 1944, that left him severely wounded. He later recalled in a post-war interview, "We saw them above us, fat silhouettes against the sun. Someone laughed and said, 'Here come the fat pigs.' Nobody was laughing 30 seconds later. They came down like an avalanche, faster than we could react. The first pass destroyed 3 of our fighters. Just vanished, turned into burning debris. Their guns didn't fire in bursts like ours. They poured continuous streams of fire. To be caught in that stream meant instant death. Chapter 8. Supremacy in Sky and Earth. April through June 1944. The fighter-bomber-killer escort missions revealed another P-47 advantage: endurance. While German fighters operated at maximum power settings that consumed fuel rapidly, the big American radial engines could cruise efficiently at high altitude. Thunderbolts could stay with the bombers for hours, rotating top cover, conserving enough fuel for combat and return. When more P-51 Mustangs arrived for long-range escort duty in spring 1944, P-47 units increasingly focused on ground attack, a role that would make them the most feared aircraft in the German arsenal. The transition began in earnest in April 1944 as the Allies prepared for the invasion of France. The Thunderbolt's heavy machine gun battery proved equally effective against ground targets. Standard armor-piercing incendiary ammunition could penetrate the top armor of most German vehicles, while the sheer volume of fire could destroy unarmored targets in seconds. A 2-second burst placed 160 50 caliber rounds into a target area the size of a truck. But the addition of bombs and rockets transformed the P-47 into a true multi-role monster. The D-25 variant could carry 2,000-pound bombs under the wings and one 500-pound bomb under the fuselage, a bomb load equal to medium bombers of the early war. Late variants added zero-length launch rails for 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, each equivalent to a 105mm artillery shell. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment during the Normandy campaign, experienced P-47 ground attacks firsthand. They came in low, so low you could see the pilots' faces. The sound was terrifying. The roar of engines, the whistle of rockets. Then the hammers of those heavy machine guns. A column of our trucks simply ceased to exist. 20 vehicles turned into burning wreckage in one pass. The psychological effect on the men was devastating. They called them Jabos, fighter bombers. But this was something beyond that. This was flying artillery with sniper precision. On June 6, 1944, the Luftwaffe discovered how completely the balance of power had shifted. Over 500 P-47s provided air cover for the invasion, creating an impenetrable umbrella over the beaches. German fighters attempting to reach the landing zones were annihilated. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of Fighter Wing 2, one of only 3 German pilots to reach the beaches that day, reported, "The sky belonged to the Americans. Thunderbolts were stacked from sea level to 30,000 feet. We attempted to break through at dawn. 12 fighters from our grouper. I was the only one who returned. P-47s waited at every altitude. Couldn't climb above them, couldn't dive below them. Their guns turned our fighters into aluminum rain." In the weeks following D-Day, P-47s systematically destroyed German daylight movement. The statistics were staggering. In June alone, 9th Air Force Thunderbolts claimed destruction of 651 locomotives, 3,847 trucks, 512 tanks and armoured vehicles, 4,553 horse-drawn wagons. The Wehrmacht was forced to move only at night, severely hampering their ability to respond to Allied advances. The Germans tried everything to counter the Thunderbolt threat. They increased vehicle armour, deployed more anti-aircraft guns, developed new camouflage techniques. Nothing worked. The P-47's combination of speed, armour and firepower made them nearly unstoppable. Even the dreaded 88mm flak guns struggled to track fast-moving fighters at low altitude. Chapter 9. The Pacific Test. October 1943 through August 1945. Monsters over jungles. While devastating Europe, the P-47 simultaneously proved its worth in the Pacific theatre. The 348th Fighter Group, operating from New Guinea, found the Thunderbolt's qualities ideally suited for the vast distances and harsh conditions of Pacific warfare. Colonel Neil Kirby, commanding the 348th, developed tactics specifically for the Pacific. On October 11, 1943, Kirby led 4 P-47s against 40 Japanese aircraft over Wewak, shooting down 6 enemy aircraft personally in one mission, earning him the Medal of Honor. The Japanese, accustomed to fighting nimble but fragile American fighters, were unprepared for the P-47's combination of firepower and durability. Japanese ace Saburo Sakai, who encountered P-47s over New Guinea, later wrote, "We called them monsters. Our 20mm cannons, which could destroy a P-40 with a few hits, seemed to have no effect. I put dozens of shells into one Thunderbolt and watched it fly away. Their return fire was terrifying. Streams of heavy bullets that tore aircraft apart. The P-47N, designed specifically for the Pacific, featured increased fuel capacity with wet wings holding 93 gallons each, extending range to 2,350 miles. This variant would escort B-29s to Japan, proving that the short-legged fighter of 1943 had evolved into a true long-range weapon." Chapter 10. Hunting Jets. November 1944 through April 1945. Propeller versus jet. Perhaps the ultimate vindication of the P-47's evolution came in its encounters with German jet fighters. The Messerschmitt Me-262, with a maximum speed of 540 miles per hour, should have been untouchable by propeller fighters. But Thunderbolt pilots discovered they could catch jets in 2 situations: during takeoff and landing when jets were most vulnerable, and in high-speed dives from altitude. On November 27, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel John C. Meyer of the 352nd Fighter Group became one of the first pilots to shoot down a Me-262 in a P-47. Diving from 28,000 feet, Meyer's Thunderbolt reached speeds approaching 500 miles per hour, fast enough to overtake the jet in level flight. The jet pilot, confident in his speed advantage, never saw the diving P-47 until Meyer's guns opened fire at 400 yards. Meyer's combat report noted, "Enemy aircraft disintegrated under fire. Large pieces including both engines separated from fuselage. Pilot did not escape. Concentrated .50 caliber fire proved more effective than we expected against jet aircraft." By early 1945, specialized P-47M variants were deployed specifically to counter German jets and V-1 flying bombs. With water methanol injection boosting power to 2,800 horsepower and refined aerodynamics, these final Thunderbolts could reach 470 miles per hour in level flight at 30,000 feet, fast enough to intercept even jets under certain conditions. Major George Bostwick, commanding the 63rd Fighter Squadron equipped with P-47Ms, shot down 2 Me-262s in March 1945. His tactical report emphasized firepower over speed. "The jets are faster, but they can't turn and they can't take punishment. One good burst from our battery and they come apart like they're made of paper. They have to slow down to attack bombers. That's when we get them." Chapter 11. The Final Gamble. January 1st, 1945. Operation Bodenplatte. The ultimate demonstration of American industrial might came during Operation Bodenplatte, the Luftwaffe's desperate attempt to destroy Allied air power on January 1st, 1945. Nearly 900 German fighters, including their best remaining pilots, launched surprise attacks on Allied airfields across Belgium and the Netherlands. At airfield Y-34 near Metz, where the 365th Fighter Group based its P-47s, the attack initially succeeded. German fighters destroyed 22 Thunderbolts on the ground, along with several other aircraft. A captured German pilot was brought to the command post. He pointed at the burning aircraft and sneered, "What do you think of that?" Major George Brooking's response became legendary throughout the 9th Air Force. He pointed to the flight line where ground crews were already pushing damaged aircraft aside and preparing hard stands for replacements. "By tomorrow, we'll have 40 new ones. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" The German pilot's smirk disappeared. Within 48 hours, factory-fresh P-47 D-40s filled the flight line, flown in from depots in England. The Luftwaffe lost 271 aircraft and 213 pilots in Bodenplatte, including many irreplaceable instructors and squadron commanders. These losses they could never replace. The Americans lost 134 aircraft total across all attacked airfields, all replaced within a week. Chapter 12. The Numbers of Inevitability. Industrial Avalanche. The numbers told the story of inevitable defeat. Republic Aviation produced 15,683 P-47s during the war, more than any other American fighter. At peak production, the Farmingdale, Long Island factory completed one Thunderbolt every hour around the clock. The Evansville, Indiana plant, built from empty farmland in 1942, produced 500 aircraft monthly by 1944. Each P-47D required 65,000 individual parts, 8 miles of electrical wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, 300 pounds of rubber. The engine itself contained 2,400 individual components, machined to tolerances of thousandths of an inch. Yet American workers, many of them women who had never seen an aircraft before Pearl Harbor, assembled these complex machines with precision exceeding peacetime standards. Ammunition production was equally staggering. Each P-47 sortie required 3,450 caliber rounds. With hundreds of Thunderbolts flying daily, ammunition consumption exceeded 10 million rounds monthly by mid-1944. Lake City Arsenal in Missouri, one of several ammunition plants, produced 30 million rounds monthly. Each cartridge was manufactured to tolerances measured in 10,000ths of an inch, ensuring reliable feeding through synchronized machine gun mechanisms. Fuel consumption was enormous. Each Thunderbolt burned 100 gallons per hour in normal flight, up to 300 gallons in combat with water injection engaged. The 9th Air Force alone consumed over 25 million gallons of aviation fuel monthly by late 1944. All of this transported across the Atlantic on tankers that were themselves products of American mass production. Even more impressive than aircraft production was pilot training. By 1944, the United States was graduating 30,000 pilots annually from advanced training, more than Germany trained during the entire war. Each P-47 pilot received a minimum of 400 hours flight time before entering combat, including 100 hours in advanced fighters. German pilots, by contrast, entered combat with less than 100 hours total time by war's end. The quality showed in combat. American pilots arrived in Europe trained in formation flying, instrument navigation, gunnery, and tactics. They practiced against captured German aircraft, understanding their enemy's capabilities and limitations. They knew their aircraft systems intimately, having studied technical manuals German pilots never received. Chapter 13. Voices of Defeat. March through May, 1945. Enemy Admissions. In March 1945, Oberst Joseph Priller, the same pilot who mocked P-47s as pregnant cows 2 years earlier, was interviewed by German propaganda officials seeking morale-boosting material. His statement, deemed too demoralizing for publication, revealed the complete transformation in German sentiment. The Thunderbolt is the best fighter bomber ever built. Its firepower is unprecedented. Weapons that never jam, never overheat, never run out of ammunition in normal combat. It carries bombs like a medium bomber, fires rockets like artillery, and fights like a fighter when needed. But behind the machine is what it represents: unlimited American production. They lose 10, they build 20. We lose 1. He's gone forever. Their pilots arrive better trained than our instructors. They have fuel for training, ammunition for practice, spare parts for everything. We have nothing but courage. And courage without resources is just delayed defeat. We laughed at them in 43. We're not laughing now. When you hear those guns, you know death has come. The sound haunts us. Mechanical, precise, unstoppable. Like everything American, it's about overwhelming material superiority. They didn't beat us with better tactics or braver pilots. They buried us under an avalanche of steel and lead. By April 1945, The Luftwaffe existed mostly on paper. Fuel shortages grounded most aircraft. Experienced pilots were dead or captured. Airfields were cratered ruins. But even with aircraft and fuel, German pilots faced an impossible equation. Attacking meant encountering formations of P-47s dominating every altitude from ground level to 40,000 feet. Feldwebel Klaus Brettschneider, one of the last German pilots trained in 1945, flew exactly one combat mission before the war ended. His encounter with P-47s over Leipzig lasted 12 seconds. I saw them diving from above, 4 Thunderbolts in perfect formation. I tried to turn, but they were too fast. The leader opened fire at 500 meters. My aircraft shook like it had been hit by sledgehammers. The engine exploded, the wings separated. I barely bailed out. On my parachute, I watched them destroy my entire staffel. 6 fighters disappeared in less than a minute. The sky rained burning aluminum and bodies. The psychological impact was complete. German pilots developed what medical officers called Jabo fever, physical stress symptoms appearing when Thunderbolts were reported in the area. Veterans who had met Spitfires and Hurricanes without fear became physically ill before missions against P-47s. The characteristic thunder of approaching Thunderbolts caused panic among ground troops, who knew survival meant immediate search for cover. Chapter 14. The Final Tally Statistics of Destruction. The final statistics of P-47 operations defied comprehension. In Europe, 3,752 German aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, 3,315 aircraft destroyed on the ground, 86,000 railway cars destroyed, 9,000 locomotives destroyed, 6,000 armoured fighting vehicles, destroyed 68,000 trucks, destroyed 60,000 horse-drawn wagons, destroyed in the Pacific, 697 Japanese aircraft destroyed in aerial combat, 150 aircraft destroyed on the ground, 1,500 vehicles destroyed, 150 locomotives destroyed, countless barges, ships, and installations. Notable American aces on the P-47: Francis S. Gabreski, 28 victories, top P-47 ace in Europe. Robert S. Johnson, 27 victories. Neil E. Kirby, 22 victories, Medal of Honor. Walker M. Mahurin, 19.75 victories on P-47. David C. Schilling, 22.5 victories. Behind these numbers lay a human cost impossible to measure by statistics. The Luftwaffe lost approximately 28,000 pilots killed in action against Western Allied forces. Many fell to concentrated American heavy machine gun fire. Each loss represented years of training Germany could never replace. By war's end, the average German fighter pilot had less than 30 hours combat experience. The average P-47 pilot had over 200 hours. This experience disparity was as deadly as the production disparity. Chapter 15. Archives of Surrender. German Intelligence Dossiers. At the Luftwaffe Interrogation Center in Oberursel, captured Allied pilots were systematically questioned by German intelligence. This wasn't merely information gathering. It was an attempt to understand how the war was slipping from their grasp. Records captured by the Allies in 1945 revealed German assessments of Allied aircraft, document by document tracking growing desperation. The P-47 dossier, continuously updated throughout the war, showed the complete reversal of opinion, from contempt to terror. April 1943. Large, unmaneuverable fighter, inferior to German types in all performance parameters except diving speed. Machine gun armament insufficient against cannon-armed fighters. Threat assessment minimal. Recommendation: continue standard intercept tactics. December 1943. Exceptional high-altitude performance. Extreme structural strength allows aircraft to survive damage fatal to standard fighters. Firepower increasingly problematic. Sustained bursts capable of literally sawing aircraft apart. Pilots demonstrate significantly improved tactics. Threat assessment, significant above 25,000 feet. Recommendation, avoid combat at high altitude. June 1944. Dominant fighter bomber on all theatres, superior to all German types above 20,000 feet. Firepower devastating against all target types, aerial and ground. Structural strength makes destruction extremely difficult even with multiple hits. New modifications with improved propellers demonstrate increased rate of climb. Threat assessment, critical at all altitudes. Recommendation, avoid direct engagement where possible. March 1945. Best fighter bomber of the war. Combination of firepower, durability, and performance unmatched in any air force. Pilot quality exceptional. Arrive with 400+ hours flight time versus our 50 to 100 hours. Numerical superiority absolute. Threat assessment. Survival in direct engagement statistically impossible. Recommendation, operations only when critically necessary. The final update was dated April 15, 1945, 3 weeks before surrender. A German intelligence officer added a handwritten note in the margin. Further updates pointless. We have no pilots to fly, no fuel for engines, no hope of changing the situation. Chapter 16. Meeting of Enemies. Phoenix, 1985. Voices of Reconciliation. In September 1985, 40 years after war's end, a meeting occurred in a Phoenix, Arizona hotel conference room that would have been unthinkable in 1945. German and American fighter pilots, former mortal enemies, gathered for the annual reunion of the American Fighter Aces Association. Grey-haired men in blazers with lapels decorated with squadron badges exchanged handshakes and memories. Lieutenant General Adolf Galland, former general of fighters for the Luftwaffe, one of Germany's most celebrated aces with 104 victories, was the guest of honor. During a panel discussion, the moderator asked the question everyone wanted answered. General Galland, what do you think of the P-47 Thunderbolt now, looking back? The room fell silent. Television cameras captured the moment. Galland, the 73-year-old veteran, slowly rose. His answer, recorded on video, became one of the war's most honest admissions. We made a terrible mistake in '43. We saw this big, heavy fighter and laughed. The Americans don't understand air combat, we said. They built a bomber and called it a fighter. They're trying to compensate for lack of skill with brute force. We were arrogant. We were fools. It was we who didn't understand. The Americans weren't trying to build a European fighter. They built an American one, designed around production, firepower, and survivability. They understood what we couldn't accept, that in a war of attrition, the most elegant aircraft doesn't win. The aircraft wins that can take punishment, deliver devastating firepower, and be produced faster than the enemy can destroy it. They were right. We were wrong. The first time I flew a captured P-47 after the war, in autumn '45, I understood everything. I climbed into the cockpit, spacious, comfortable, with excellent visibility, started the engine, that massive R2800, and felt power that exceeded anything I'd flown. Takeoff was impressive. Climb, it just went up, like falling upward. At 30,000 feet, where our Fw-190s gasped, this aircraft still had full power. Controls were precise, stability incredible. And then I realized the most terrifying thing. This wasn't just a good machine. This was an aircraft designed for mass production and mass application. Every part was designed not just for combat, but for the factory line. Then I learned the numbers. America built over 15,000 of these complex machines, each with an engine more sophisticated than anything produced in Germany, and built them faster than we could build simple Bf-109s. That's when I finally understood we never had a chance. Those 8 machine guns. Galland paused, his voice dropping. We called them Roosevelt's piano because of the sound they made. So mechanical, so relentless. Not bursts like our cannons, a continuous stream of fire. Once you heard that sound, you never forgot it. Many of my friends and comrades heard it for the last time. Galland paused, surveying the room where American P-47 pilots sat. You gentlemen who flew Thunderbolts, you didn't just defeat the Luftwaffe, you annihilated it. And you did it in a machine we laughed at. That was our final mistake. The room erupted in applause. American and German veterans rose, saluting each other. Enemies had become brothers, united by respect for their shared ordeal. Robert Johnson, sitting in the front row, the same pilot who survived the encounter with an unknown German pilot in '43, wiped away tears. After the event, a reporter asked Johnson about his feelings. 42 years ago, a German pilot could have killed me but didn't, Johnson said quietly. He fired all his ammunition at my aircraft, then just flew away. I always wanted to find him, thank him for letting me see my children and grandchildren. I never found him. But today, listening to General Galland, I understood. We were all just guys doing our jobs. They were good pilots. We just had better tools. And yeah, the Thunderbolt was one hell of a tool. Chapter 17. Philosophy of the Hammer. American Engineering versus German Perfection, the P-47. Thunderbolt's design represented American industrial philosophy in pure form. Brute force engineering backed by unlimited resources and ruthless practicality. Every component was overstrong, overpowered, and over-engineered. The wing spars could withstand 40,000 pounds of load, 3 times the aircraft's maximum takeoff weight. Republic engineers knew that in combat, pilots would perform maneuvers far beyond normal limits, so they built with triple safety margins. The engine mount could withstand 12 G loads, force that would tear most German fighters apart. Control cables were doubled throughout with automatic backup systems. If one cable severed from bullet strike, the second continued functioning. Even the ammunition feed system was an engineering marvel. 8 separate ammunition boxes, each containing 425 rounds, fed through electric booster motors. This prevented jamming during high G maneuvers, a problem that plagued many early war fighters. The machine guns were electrically heated to prevent freezing at 33,000 feet, where temperature dropped to -58 degrees Fahrenheit. Each gun had its own charging mechanism and could be individually synchronized with the propeller. Convergence, the point where all 8 gun streams intersected, was adjustable from 450 to 1,200 feet, allowing pilots to optimize for their preferred fighting style. Even after the war, some German veterans stubbornly maintained the myth that the P-47 won by quantity, not quality. That German fighters were technically superior, but simply overwhelmed by numbers. Combat records tell an entirely different story. In engagements where numbers were equal, or even favored the Germans, P-47s consistently prevailed. Especially after mid-1944, when American pilots mastered their machines' tactics. The heavy machine gun armament German engineers dismissed as inferior to cannons proved more effective in actual combat for one simple reason: hit probability. Analysis of thousands of feet of gun camera film revealed a mathematical truth of aerial combat. Cannon shells, though individually more destructive, required precise aim. A 5-degree miss meant complete miss, and ammunition was limited, typically 120 to 200 rounds per gun, giving 12 to 20 seconds of fire. The P-47's 8 machine guns created what ballisticians called a probability cloud. Firing all 8 created a zone approximately 10 feet in diameter at convergence range. Even with imperfect aim, something hit. And when something hit, everything else followed. At typical combat ranges, a 2-second burst placed a minimum of 20 to 30 50 caliber rounds into a fighter-sized target. This was more than sufficient to ensure fatal damage. The ammunition itself demonstrated American superiority in metallurgy and chemistry. The M8 50 caliber armor-piercing incendiary round used a hardened steel core with delay fuse. The bullet penetrated armor or skin, then detonated inside the structure. The incendiary compound, magnesium and barium mixture, burned at 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to ignite aluminum alloys, fuel, and even structural elements. German 20mm Minengeschoss shells, though more powerful, often exploded on first contact with skin, creating spectacular but sometimes superficial damage. Their thin-walled construction maximized explosive content but sacrificed penetration. The American approach was different. Penetrate deep, then destroy from within. It was lethally effective. Chapter 18. Legacy of Thunder. The heaviest warrior of the sky. The Republic P-47. Thunderbolt holds a record that will likely never be beaten. The heaviest single-engine piston fighter ever mass-produced. Its empty weight of 10,000 pounds exceeded the full takeoff weight of many early World War II fighters. It weighed more than some twin-engine fighters. Its R-2800 engine produced more power than entire World War I bomber formations. 4 engines of a Handley Page V 1500 heavy bomber totaled 1,500 horsepower. One R-2800 delivered 2,000, with water injection 2,535. Its armament delivered more firepower in 10 seconds than an infantry company in a minute of continuous fire. Yet these monsters were built by the thousands. Piloted by 19 and 20-year-old boys, many of whom had never seen an ocean before shipping to Europe. Maintained by mechanics who 6 months earlier worked farms or shops and mastered the most complex aviation machinery under enemy fire. The transformation of German opinion from contemptuous mockery to paralyzing terror took less than 2 years. During that time, the flying milk bottle, Milchflasche, as German pilots called it in spring '43, became the most feared aircraft in Luftwaffe experience. Eastern Front veterans who met hordes of Soviet Yak-9s and Lay-5s without fear, who fought Spitfires over England and hurricanes in Africa, these hardened professionals spoke of the P-47 in hushed, almost superstitious tones decades after the war. When du die Donner hörst, ist es zu spät. When you hear the thunder, it's already too late, they said. Epilogue. The display case in Dayton evidence that needs no words at the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio, in a massive hangar among dozens of legendary aircraft, stands a restored P-47 D-30RA. Serial number 44-20371. Tail code LMS. It once flew with the 82nd Fighter Squadron, 78th Fighter Group. Restorers recreated it in summer 1944 configuration. Typical loading for an escort mission over Germany. 2 75-gallon drop tanks under the wings. Full ammunition load. Invasion stripes on wings and fuselage. Silver aluminum gleams under museum lights. The huge 4-blade Hamilton Standard propeller, 13 feet in diameter, frozen motionless. Inscription on the cowling, Big Stud. Thousands of visitors pass daily. Most take selfies and move on. But some linger. Beside the aircraft, a small display case. Inside lie artifacts that tell the real story. 8 fired .50 caliber shell casings, polished by time to dull golden shine. A strip of gun camera film, protected by plastic. It captures an 8-frame sequence. Focke-Wulf Fw-190 in the gun sight. Traces converging. Hit explosions, wings separating, fuselage disintegrating, debris cloud, empty sky. This took 1.8 seconds of real time. Beside it, a worn leather flight helmet with faded earphones and oxygen mask. It belonged to Lieutenant James Clark, who shot down 3 Bf-109s in one sortie, March 8, 1944. Clark survived the war, returned home, became a history teacher. Died in 1998 at age 76. And at the bottom of the case, under glass, on yellowed paper, German typescript with English translation alongside. It's an excerpt from an interrogation report dated May 3, 1945. Location: prisoner of war camp, England. Subject: Feldwebel Werner Stahl, 22 years old, pilot, 2nd Group, Fighter Wing 53. Question. Describe your last combat sortie. Answer. It was April 28th over Munich. We received orders to intercept American bombers. We had 8 fighters. Only 8. That's all that remained of our Staffel. A year ago, we had 32. We saw Thunderbolts above. Always above. They're always higher. They dove. We tried to turn, but they were too fast, too powerful. I saw one open fire on Knopf. It wasn't like shooting. It was indistinct, a river of fire. Knopf's aircraft just ceased to exist. Didn't catch fire, didn't fall, just flew apart into 1,000 pieces. Then they turned toward us. I pressed the trigger, but my cannons jammed. Cold. Malfunction, I don't know. Didn't matter. I jumped. 6 of 8 of my comrades died in 2 minutes. As I descended on my parachute, I could hear them. More thunderbolts, flying circles. That sound of the engines. It haunts me. Question. What do you think of the P-47? Answer. Long pause. We laughed at them in 43. We called them fat, ugly, slow. We were fools. They didn't beat us with better flying. They didn't beat us with braver pilots. We had brave men. We had aces. They just buried us with steel, lead, numbers, relentless mechanical efficiency. When you hear those 8 machine guns, you know, death has come, and it won't miss. End of interview.